All right, hey everyone, welcome to the No Guts, No Galaxy podcast 157. We are your host, Phil and Darren. Today is March 10th, 2017. I'd like to first say, what took you so long, Mama Bear? How big of a cup of coffee do you have over there?
Well, size doesn't matter. That's what I'm told. But yeah, it's a pretty big bowl of coffee. I'm ready to go. It's my second of the day. Obviously, we've been having a lot of discussions, and I need the coffee to keep going. But yeah, I'm excited. It's another podcast. It's been a couple weeks. Obviously, we skipped some, had other things going on, and we're waiting for, pretty relevant topics, which I think we have today.
I think we have a topic or two that is on everybody's mind. I mean, just tossing that out there. I'd like to give a quick shout out to everyone in chat. Hopefully you guys are having a great day. Again, if you guys want to help spread the word of the podcast, the gospel that is the Mech Conversation, retweets are appreciated. Dropping that link in the chat. And of course, welcome to everyone out there. We have a new guest on the podcast. You guys have never met him, or have you? Oh my.
Well, first, let's before we get into that specific person.
Are we not gonna? We're not gonna hint that. No, we're not gonna.
No, we will. But
Okay.
I just want to say that first of all, thank you for everybody being here. Obviously, there's a lot of people here, a lot of turnout. It's a topic of passion for a lot of people, and what we're talking about today is the skill tree, PTS, balance, etc. Stuff that has been on people's minds over the last few weeks or more. Lots of feedback coming in all over the place. Twitter, the forums, Reddit, obviously. So what we're hoping to do here today is to shed a little light on some stuff that may be not understood. Obviously, hear your guys' points of view, and we'll get into that. We've been listening, we've been discussing. But hopefully, I don't want to say alleviate some of the pain, but
bring to light a perspective that you may not be aware of.
Shine some light, but also address the concerns. We're going to address the concerns directly and have a discussion with you guys. And you guys in chat are totally welcome to be a part of the discussion. We'll be doing our best to basically monitor what you guys are saying and address you directly, including, yes, our first main guest, which, Phil, if you want to go ahead and say who our guest is today.
So come on down, Chris Lowrey. How you doing, Chris?
Doing good, guys. Thanks for having me.
So
welcome to the podcast.
Chris, I've known you for a long time, but maybe someone out there doesn't know you. What are you? Who are you? What do you do?
What are you?
Or do we blame you for everything? Is that how this works?
Yeah, are we starting hashtag blame Chris?
I'm sure after this podcast.
Welcome, man.
Yep. So I got brought on to PGI back in around September, October, and since then I've been helping them out as a game designer, working on balance for the game. So probably from like November on out is when you guys have probably seen my work as far as a direct hand and things. And most recently I've been working on the PTS with the skill tree and whatnot.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you here, and you will be able to address most of the concerns and the issues that we're going to be going over directly. But I do want to let everybody know and remember that Chris is not a decision maker. He has a department lead, and nor are Phil and I decision makers. But speaking of decision makers, we also have another guest in the house today, and that is Russ Bullock. Russ is here. He's going to be kind of chilling in the background, listening to the conversation. He wants to address a couple things specifically, but Chris is here more to go topic by topic. But anyway, welcome, Russ, and happy Friday to you.
Thank you. I like how you backed away from the true responsibility there at that last second. It's like, but I have nothing to do with anything. Talk to Russ.
Yes, yeah. That's
right. That's true. Ultimately, decisions have to be approved by myself and Paul, but ultimately myself, so you can blame me in the end. Yes, I just would like to say I'm glad we're able to introduce Chris, and it's been really great working with him. He's a true professional. He knows how to. He's very smart. He understands the game very well. Understands the inner mechanics of the game, and has a mind for finding balance and finding trade-offs, and I think has an unbiased approach to things. So I think people should keep that in mind. And in the end, all of us here at Piranha don't have a vested interest in say, supporting a faction or another, like meaning, I don't mean a mech warrior faction, but like, whether it's people like the boat or min-max, or all we really care about is trying to achieve a balance. And Chris has that unbiased approach when he does his work, and he's been doing a great job. And it's a hard job, as he's found out. Very hard job.
You don't
Yeah.
say.
Thanks, Russ.
No doubt. And also, he is part of a team. He's not tackling balance on his own or anything like that. But let's go ahead and dive right in, because I have a feeling there's not going to be a lack of things to talk about today. And you know how I am about punctuality, as we started
What?
20 minutes late.
You? No.
But anyway, let's get into it. So we're going to obviously be talking about skill tree, PTS, and how that's all been working out in balance, etc. So let's start off with balance, which is, and Chris, do you want to kind of address where balance is currently, some of the issues, and what are the goals with what we're doing? Obviously, skill tree and balance are not the same thing, although they're intertwined and there's crossover or whatever. But give us an idea of where you think we're at currently with balance and where we're going, and what are some of the goals behind what we're doing.
Well,
Big question.
Answer
So-
everything right now.
I guess to start this answer, let's back up to when I basically first started with these guys. And one of the first things that I pretty much did was try to get a nice big metrics pull of where everything was up until the point that I came on, and really look at some of the stuff that is currently not as apparent to players just by playing the game. And this was pretty much just like a deep metrics dive, and as well as like my own experience playing the game, and just looking at things like average C-bill earnings, average damage, win-loss rates for different chassis, popularity, and all that stuff. And we basically came up with a game plan as far as like how we were going to be addressing some of the stuff down the road. But I think like one of the big things that we basically discovered was what we ultimately outlined out as far as what we want to try to bring to the game moving forward with balance. So the first point is that what I'm really trying to push forward is improving currently underutilized equipment and options. So, when I first came on, I know machine guns was a big issue. So, we tried to fix it. Obviously, not everything is as simple as just a few XML changes, but, we're going to try to get around to looking at the ways to, improve the stuff that we currently have in the game as is, especially with the new tech coming down.
Speaking of, new tech is definitely something that's going to affect balance and so forth. Can you speak a little bit on quirks, new tech coming down the road, and things like engine desync, mobility changes, and so forth?
Yeah.
And how that affects balance?
In relationship to the PTS, or just right now?
Both. Like, again, kind of in the broader perspective of where we are and where we're going with it. Because obviously we know where quirks have been. Are quirks disappearing? Where is that going? New technology, how does that come into play? Obviously engine desync's pretty big with mobility changes.
So quirks aren't going away. They're going to stay where they are. We're going to be bringing down offensive quirks a little bit, and I've seen the feedback in regards to that decision, but ultimately I feel it's important that we kind of stick with that, mostly because we need to get to balancing some baseline systems that kind of aggravates some stuff at the top, as well as the fact that we've got new stuff coming pretty soon, so we really need to make a push to kind of get some baseline balance to the stuff that's already in the game, because we don't want to introduce new stuff that is going to massively disrupt things when a lot of these mechs that have been around in the game for so long have these massive amounts of quirks that don't just correspond to the current equipment in the game right now as it is, but also might have implications in the future with new tech coming down the road.
I think it needs to also be said is people need to understand how quirks and what their implementation on the PTS. Like, a lot of people didn't realize that basically how the engine desync work is that you guys set a base stat for all weight classes, but then the quirk that was applied to the mech's agility, like for instance Excel DXL turn rate, was also then applied on top of that base stat. So for instance, there was a keep in mind, some people may have recognized when PTS2 went up, there were some issues with DXL. That was a bug. It was fixed. You guys addressed it on last Friday's patch. And if you hadn't tested it after that, it fixed the issue with the lights and mediums, even heavies and assaults, but you didn't really notice it as much. So, for instance, if a mech had, for instance, a Locust 80% Excel, that was on top of the base number. That actually didn't go away. It was just rolled into the base stat. So instead of it displaying 80% on a quirk, it's just rolled into the base stat. So if you would have looked at Excel DXL, you could see that in kilometers per hour a second, you may have a difference between one variant and another. And I think that just needs to be distinguished. Some people miss that aspect of the PTS as well. So if you had a mech that had those quirks, agility-wise, those were rolled into those aspects.
Yeah. So just to kind of backtrack as far as talking about baseline systems and the engine desync and whatnot. This kind of came about because we are taking a good hard look at the IS and clan balance at the baseline, and both the mobility attributes of the clans, through just the max engines that they were able to carry, as well as what hasn't been mentioned, the critical hit systems are just kind of two of the base systems that we've kind of identified as, it might not be that big of a deal, but it does. It's kind of just like the death by 1,000 paper cuts that kind of adds to the natural imbalance that you kind of see with the clans, and why IS quirks have kind of been where they have been for a long time. And that's so while we are indeed trying to kind of bring down IS quirks to help get a better baseline against them, we're also working on addressing some of these baseline systems to get better balance, and things like the critical changes and the engine desync changes will affect the clans more than the IS in that regard.
And someone just brought up a question.
Yeah, you gonna duck fright?
Yeah, it's in regards to why did some mechs get their quirks nerfed in PTS, making them worse, while quirkless mechs such as the Night Gear and Kodiak gain free quirks. So when he says gain free quirks, what he's talking about is the skill tree. Well, you're incorrect. The Kodiak and the Night Gear actually did get affected by the mobility changes. And specifically, I think a good example is the Kodiak, Atlas, and Direwolf comparison. The Kodiak basically got a big nerf to its agility across the board. All Kodiaks did. And so if you were to compare the agility of a Direwolf and a Kodiak, and even their hard points and everything else, the Kodiak was on top, has better hardpoint placement than the Direwolf. It also has more tonnage available than the Direwolf because of Indo and Pharaoh and it being an Omni-Mech and the Kodiak not. So right off the bat, that the Kodiak has better hardpoints, better, more available tonnage. Oh, and then it's also faster. So the engine desync actually brought the Kodiak down to the Atlas's level. And so that also allows, in some regards, I guess the Direwolf got a slight buff to its agility. Is that correct, Chris?
It's got about the same natural stats for the Direwolf, but it got a buff in the way that you can now have a bit more freedom through the skill tree, because the skill tree isn't a one-to-one translation for what we currently have on live right now. And I think that it's currently set to about 25% on the agility and deceleration and various attributes, whereas in the current system it's capped out at 15%. So while the baseline attributes of the Direwolf remain kind of unchanged with engine desync, it's gotten a kind of an indirect buff in that you can now skill into the mobility attributes to make it a bit more flexible.
And I think, can we also say, what does this do in the grand scheme of things as far as engine desync? Because I feel like a lot of people miss the fact of there's a lot of mechs that got buffed because of this. Right? It brought down a few mechs that were under, overperformers per se, of course. But, is that sort of one of the unintended side effects, as well as the Vindy and all those mechs also got a pretty sizable buff, right? Because their engine size is smaller, right? The actual physical size.
Well, yeah, to kind of take a step back and to get to the original question as far as, what that did to the Direwolves and to, Night Gears. Well, while it's true that ISMX quirks got down, it might seem like there's essentially a natural buff because now those mechs like the Night Gear and Kodiak have access to more stuff through the skill tree. The thing is that there's also the engine desync that heavily affects both of those mechs, in addition to the critical hit changes for the clans. So now those components are getting blown out a little bit easier on the clan mechs as well. So while yes, the IS did go down, and you're able to buff these mechs, there are other changes in the works at a more baseline system that do negatively impact those high performing mechs. But on the flip side of that, there are a ton of mechs, mostly on the IS side, that either have low engine cap or want to take standard engines. And under the previous meta, they really couldn't, because it was kind of this go big or go home mentality because of how the mobility stacked on top of the natural abilities of the mechs, and quirks on top of that just either scaled or didn't scale. And you're left with these mechs that were, in order to even compete, you needed to take these big engines. And in a game where we're basically still allowing you to essentially customize the engines, we really need to have a better kind of baseline dynamic with that aspect of the customization system, because we need to have it be at least an option that a mech might want to strip down on an engine to take either more weapons or more armor, whatever, um, and still have it compete against other things. So mechs like the Awesome, mechs like the Supernova, and those mechs that have those low engine caps stand to gain much more from the engine desync than the mechs that were on the top, like the Kodiak or the Night Gear, that are getting brought down a little bit more.
Gotcha.
All right. Do we have anything, that we can further discuss on the whole quirks thing?
I mean,
Technology.
I think other than quirks aren't going away, it's still going to be looked at. I'm assuming, Chris, that you guys are just going to monitor, right? I mean, as far as like if a mech still needs a performance boost, it may get a boost in its base stat, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing change. We're going to be monitoring stuff that's going on with the skill tree, the quirk system, and just all these baseline changes that we're doing as well.
Solid.
Russ, is there anything that you can say as far as the tech that's going to be released, when we might be getting an announcement on that, details or
It's
anything?
the 14th, isn't it? I think that's when the official.
I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, that's right. Tuesday the 14th, we're going to have an announcement for, I want to make it clear to people that is the day that we are going to announce a major update for MechCon 9 that'll come a little later in the summer. It'll also be, include information on this whole new technology timeline stuff, and as well as the new mech pack that goes along with that. All that, is set for like a summer release, but this is you get all the information and everything, and then, the mech pack and all that stuff comes on Tuesday.
Excellent. All right, then let's move into the big topic, the skill tree. Chris, can you give us kind of an idea of the overall goals with the skill tree? With in mind, I should preface, obviously, not because we are throwing anybody under the bus or not throwing anybody under the bus, but again, just to reiterate, this is not your design. You've just been a part of the team working on it. But now, give us your explanations.
There's a lot of moving parts to kind of the current skill tree, and why we're pretty much looking forward to introducing it to everyone. The main thing that we're trying to do is kind of take the old pilot lab that everyone knows we've had since open beta, and kind of have a bit more ownership in how you basically customize the amount of skills that you put in that will help supplement the role of your mech in the battlefield. So at kind of a top-down level, we're looking at having the skill tree essentially be a vehicle to basically pick what general roles you want to occupy in the match, whether you want to focus more on offensive, defensive, or mobility or some of the other supplementary aspects.
All right, that sounds good. And this was just an overall, like, a broad, what's the
Very
point
broad.
of it? We are going to address, individual issues that the community has had. We did have a kind of a pre-podcast discussion with some people that have been pretty vocal about, what they think that the tree should be, or how to implement it or whatever. And I thought it was a really good discussion. Well, maybe not everybody left that meeting sold or whatever on the idea. I think it opened a lot of eyes as far as the reasoning and the process behind the scenes and goal designs or design goals, etc. So hopefully we can kind of get a similar thing going on here, at least a discussion. So guys, as we tackle these individual, bullet points regarding the skill tree, your concerns in the community, feel free to address some of these in chat, and Zoof will be picking them up for us, and we'll try and, if we're not already answering it or are about to answer it, however, we'll get to some of your specific questions. So the first one, and this is a common thing, is basically we have our current tree, and there's some people out there that have put forward their design ideas for a different type of tree, more of a linear kind of tree. What are your thoughts on that, Chris? Why are we not doing a linear tree, as I should say?
Well, we started the entire PTS process with a bit more of a linear tree, with all the weapons basically broken up, a lot more kind of linear choices with many of the other kind of branches that you can go down and everything. And one of the big things that kind of went against what we were trying to do is that people are basically picking only a few things from every tree, like the one thing that they basically want to add to their mech, and just running with kind of everything. And even within some of these linear trees that I've been monitoring on Reddit and various
including
things.
Because people are bringing it up, sorry to interrupt, including, yes, Salamas. We looked very closely, and he's one of the people we discussed all this with. So we are addressing specifically Salamas. We're aware of what he put forward, and continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so like the big thing that we want is to basically, for investments to actually be towards more general roles, and not necessarily cherry picking exactly what you want from every single thing, and just really trying to find a place in how the mech is going to operate within the match. So like taking the weapon tree for example right now, in order to say cherry pick a heat gen or a cooldown node, currently you have I think like about 28 point investment in order to do it. And the reason that we've kind of done this is that we really want to make sure that, especially for those high value nodes, that it is a significant investment in order to kind of acquire those nodes. But then after you pretty much make that significant investment to get those things, it's a little bit easier to kind of branch into other things and get things that kind of occupy the general space that those trees basically represent. So whereas getting a heat gen or a cooldown maxed out in the current tree would take you 28 nodes, just for an individual one, to get both of them is only about 35 nodes or something like that. So the cost of actually specializing from all those skills in the trees comes down from that. And it's one of the main differences that or one of the main reasons why we don't go with a linear tree, because with a linear tree you can basically pick what you want, but then in order to get something within the similar field, it essentially doubles or triples the cost. And so what we were finding players doing in the original PTS was that they would only go for that one thing that they really wanted, and then they would just take those points and dump them into other trees, which is, we want to create a bit more of a give and take within the system that we're putting forward.
Okay, so speaking of which, give and take, let's go and roll into...
Hold on a sec.
What? What? Did I miss something?
Well, I just want to address questions as we're going through these, bullet points, instead of skipping through and just going on to the next bullet point. But One of the
question?
questions was, Salama's tree separating firepower skills away from skill nodes would really help mix builds. Either that, or leave us with the existing quirks. Your comment on
I
that?
thought having that split was actually more detrimental to diverse builds, wasn't it not? Because with the first PTS that we had, it actually promoted more of boating, if anything, because you had to dump it into one tree, other than getting the benefits now of a cooldown affects all weapons. Is that not sort of the idea?
Well, I mean, we want people to be thinking about, the general roles that they bring to the battlefield, and that includes, roles where they just might not consider going down the offensive tree at all. Like, we're trying to balance all the trees to kind of have, a balance between those mechs that, have no skills whatsoever, because obviously, as, we introduce more mechs or people pick up a new chassis, we want them to be able to drop into the match and still, be competitive against those that have been skilled up. But also, we want, the costs to matter. And if we break off the weapons tree into its own separate tree, well, then it really just becomes more of a focus of, you know, weapons are pretty much going to be equal across the board for the most part. And then it really just becomes, a focus on these kind of supplementary skills. And that's not what we really want. We want, if you want to essentially commit into weapons, we want that to take away from other aspects of the mech. If you invest heavily into survival, it comes with a cost, and so we really want players to basically be thinking about the roles that they are occupying within the battlefield, and being able to kind of cater their dives into the skill tree to go towards those general roles, because most of the customization and the min-maxing will mostly come from the mech lab anyways.
All right, so obviously there's a lot of issue with what people are calling forced or filler nodes, or what I like to call, we don't want hill climb. So also Duck is bringing up picking what you want is a bad thing. It seems like you want to have less nodes with more powerful options to promote actual meaningful choice. So let's talk about what people are calling forced or filler nodes.
Let me toss this out here.
And this is, that's, you can totally address this, Phil. And this is part of that give and take. I agree. Most people just want
no. Like I think there's valid criticism. First
Right.
BTS that went up, we had arm nodes, pitch, movement. Those aren't in anymore. And I think there's something to be said, and Chris, you can chime in here, of saying there may be nodes currently out there. That's hill climb. Someone doesn't want hill climb, and then of course we can get in the forced nodes or filler nodes, if you will. To me though, as a player, I just feel like, can we make some of those options beneficial in the tree to where they actually matter? But I feel like some of those things would have to be adjusted at the base level. So for instance, hill climb may not really be pertinent right now, but if the base values for all mechs, was to be lowered, then that, node now actually becomes a little bit more pertinent, because, you go to run up a little bit of a hill and either it slows you down dramatically or you can't get over it. But right now, in the essence, if it's just a stopgap between you and the node that you want, players will just look at it and say, well, why am I being forced to take that, right?
Well, to kind of take a step back from that and just talk about the general node costs themselves, we balance each of the individual trees more around the high value nodes instead of what you guys are saying are the filler nodes and whatnot. So if we were to say remove hill climb because it's not providing any effect, it would probably be replaced with something else, because that individual tree has basically been balanced around the cost it takes to get to those high value nodes that is going to be kind of the main reason that you're coming to or invest in that tree. But as to them not doing anything and whatnot, I mean, we have a lot of these modules are using kind of the old code for the modules, and for things like hill climb, speed retention, and various other things. I am looking into alternatives or improvements that we can make to those nodes so they're a little bit more useful. But it's one of those things that's ongoing at this point.
Okay. So as I brought up in our discussion earlier today, this is a little bit of a frustration for me, because what you just said, these each branch of the tree is balanced, or at least, you know, designed to balance overall the whole big picture, right? And of course, I know skill tree is not about balance, but I'm saying balancing the skill tree and your points and where they can go and what you can get with them or whatever. And so what I hear a lot happening out there is people, like you just said, if you took out hill climb because nobody wants it or whatever, you'd have to either increase the cost of the one that everybody's going for, that, you know, they have to go through hill climb to get, or you'd have to replace it with something else, right? So what's frustrating for me, and I may be, you know, it just may be me, is that people are essentially saying, I want X skill for whatever percentage of my skill points that I have to put into it. Okay, and they don't want the filler or whatever nodes in there. They just want the node that they want. And if it has to increase the cost of it because of what would have been filler, you know, fine. I don't understand that. If you're getting what the skill you want for X amount, one way or the other, the same percentage of your skill points. One way is just the skill for 10% of your skill points. The other way is the skill plus some filler for 10% of your skill points. Why does it matter?
So
That's been a frustration for me.
A good example would be sensors, right? So radar deprivation level 1 requires you to invest 5 SP to get to it, to level 1, which from my standpoint, if you don't care about target info gathering, if you don't care about target retention and those nodes, then that's how you may have to look at it. Now, some people will say, well, why don't you just, and Chris, feel free to hop in here. This, I'm just bringing up. And by the way, guys, I've argued, me and Chris behind the scenes have argued this, and I've argued my point. Why don't you just make it so someone can select radar deprivation for 5 SP? Because it's the exact same thing, but they don't get the extra benefits of the nodes behind, right?
So the main reason we do that is because, again, it kind of goes back into those battlefield roles that we want to have these trees invest towards. And with, you know, the radar depth and the seismic sensor, those, you know, are currently occupied in the sensor tree. And we really want, you know, the added benefits of everything that's in that tree to really focus on that role and have the seismic sensor and radar depth be essentially those big target nodes for the entirety of the tree. Now, I know that players will, you know, pretty much want, you know, the one nodes that they want, but you know what you're basically saying, where why don't you just keep the cost at, like, you know, an upfront 5 or have it off to the side or something like that? Well, the main response I would have to that is because we want it to be a reward for people who are making investments into the other nodes within the tree itself. So if you have it off to the side and you keep the actual total SP cost about the same, but you have it as kind of this offside branch from all the other skills, well, then a player that may want to invest in sensors, or they may want to invest in, you know, the target decay or the various other nodes that are in there, are punished, because if you have it off to the side, then it suddenly becomes more of an investment to both spec into that as well as the sensors. And so we really want these high value nodes to essentially be rewards for specking into the tree itself. And even though, you know, a lot of people might rush and pretty much try to just target the individual nodes that they want, again, we really want this to essentially be that upfront cost to get those nodes that you want. And now, if you want to further spec into the tree, it's a reduced cost for maxing out on other skills, because you've already made that initial investment to get the high value nodes.
Okay.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Absolutely,
Sure.
Russ.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to really simplify it and boil it down. I mean, what it turns out to be, I think, I mean, it's a min-max mentality. Some players have a lot more of it than others, but it's always supposed to be about trade-offs. I mean, people have been talking for a long time about wanting to have increased time to kill and things like this. And also, like, when we've had conversations before, Phil, like, there's a common sentiment is the triangle of mobility, firepower, and protection. Like, that's an accepted notion of balance, that a mech should have a specialty in one of those areas of the triangle, or mediocre in all three, or there's a number of ways that you can do that. But You don't have good balance when you have a mech that has top protection, top agility, and top firepower. And we've seen that with certain mechs that have had that, and that's why they become very powerful. So the notion of the skill tree, I know that people ultimately say, well, I want everything. I want to be top performing in firepower, top performing in agility, and top performing in protection. And the trees, I believe, were designed, and through some feedback from the player base too, of the initial PTSs, to be less min-max, to be less capable of creating that situation, and more geared towards trade-offs. So if I go all the way to the bottom of the protection tree and get all the protection possible, I might not have enough points to go right to the bottom of the other two aspects of that power pyramid. And that's the goal. In fact, I am open for Chris and the other people who work on this to further explore that notion of taking that concept even further, so that we can have the roles, as Chris is referring to, like you have an Atlas that is just literally a tank, and then you have someone else who's gone the opposite way, and it's going to feel different. And I think there's a lot more opportunity here for things to feel a lot different on the battlefield. When you see a particular chassis, you don't just know for sure that he's got this exact build and this exact combination of modules, and that's just the way you run one of those mechs. I think the tree is supposed to create a lot more trade-offs, a lot more of that kind of situation. So I just think there's a lot of players out there that are on board with that and they're excited about it, but there's a section of players that just aren't and will never be, because that's not, I guess they don't value really that concept of trade-off type of mentality. They want more of a, just let me cherry pick exactly what I want. And unfortunately, we've seen that with the module system. It just means that if you're not building your mech exactly like this and cherry picking these exact things, then that's all anyone will ever do, and it doesn't really become much of a skill tree. So I wish we could even go further with that concept, possibly, of saying, choose which area you want to specialize in. But at any rate, that's my thoughts on that.
We did get into this debate earlier regarding what version allows more freedom and customization, and in the current system, are we seeing more variety in this proposed, or the skill tree that's releasing on the 21st? Do we think we're going to see more variety with this? Let's debate that. Well, let's see what the people are saying. But real quick, just because this question has been brought up a bunch of times and it's what we're talking about now, and maybe we can put it to rest. People are saying, I don't have weapons in my arms, but I have to take, things that benefit my arms. Why?
It's a global system, I think, right? I mean, the tree affects all mechs equally, regardless.
Right.
So,
I do think that there's elements of OCD in this. Somebody said that was an explanation, and I deal with OCD. You know that, Phil.
Oh, here's the thing: if you take a Centurion 9AH, you have no energy, right? Hard points. Well, why would I go down? Well, see, that's the thing about the firepower tree, though, is it's basically saying, hey, you can go down the ballistic and the missile path, get some bonuses there, and there are some other little bonuses you can get over on the left side of the hemisphere. But it's basically like saying, hey, you want that heat gen, it's basically worth 2 or 3 points for you. That's what it's basically saying. So you get that small percentage boost for that SP. So the real question here, go ahead. I was going to say the real question here, I think, is not risk versus reward, but trade-offs. I asked Bandit this earlier. Throw you under the bus, Bandit. I asked him this. If radar depth is 5 initial SP to get the base level, and then I don't know, Chris, off the top of your head, I don't know if you want the full radar depth and seismic. The question I have is how powerful those modules are in the current live. As you as a player, and even a top tier player, will you invest those points? Now, someone may say, I'll take it right now on live because it's a module. I don't have to make that choice, right? Or if I have the choice, I can take it. But the real question is can you as a player and or as a team compensate for the lack of having that seismic and the lack of not being able to, lose lock instantaneously? Will you be able to overcome it with just voice comms, coordination, and teamwork? And that's where I feel like that's a great trade-off. It's basically saying, is it worth it? and we know how powerful those modules are. So to me, that's what I would like to see in the skill tree, is basically that. Is just basically you have to make choices, and there may be some, global ones that, go to possibly for some mechs, like a heavy or assault. You may want to invest into the defensive tree, right? Just for the extra boost there. But to me, that's how I look at it, is should you be able to make those decisions, and then which trees maybe are valuable on some mechs and which trees are not so valuable on others. Like if you don't have a bunch of weapon systems.
I think it's important to maybe mention to the community right now, because I'm not sure they necessarily know this, but there are limitations on the number of different skill trees we can have, because I think you brought up a Centurion doesn't have any energy and stuff, and some people wondered like why that's the case or why its trees look the way it does. I'm not sure that people know that it's really not technically feasible from a balance perspective or a work perspective or even probably a database perspective. It's just too unfathomable to essentially have a custom tree for every single variant in the game, because you're looking at, I don't even know how many hundreds of different trees that would be. So right now we essentially have a clan tree and an inner sphere tree, and then I think, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, right or wrong here, but you got the clan tree and the inner sphere tree, and then beyond that, you're able to do some different values in the tree based on weight class and a few things, but that's about it, right? Like we can't get down to like, that's precisely what we have, right? We have clan IS, and then we have some different number values based on weight class. Is that true?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, and then that's kind of it. Like otherwise, we can't get down to like, okay, now let's make it, per variant, like per chassis. You do literally have, I don't even know.
That's where quirks
what are we up to now? Like 500 plus. So yeah, so that's why when you hit that particular, there are going to be mechs that don't have certain hard points that they will be investing in particular nodes that they don't even have those kind of hard points to get to the stuff they want. And we've done the best job we can with that, I believe, and there's probably still rooms for tweaks and perfections to that we're still looking for, but that's just kind of a limitation that we should probably just make sure everyone understands.
Now, why not do a skill tree for the pilot instead of the individual mechs? Somebody's bringing up that's not canon, it's pilots that get better. There's a lot of things that can be or can't be canon. Number one, we wouldn't even be really customizing our mechs if we're going to stick, to canon. It's more you get a variant and that's it. And we all love our customization, right? So it's a matter of, this is a video game, guys, and we've brought this up plenty of times. This isn't the novel or the tabletop; it's a video game. But I'm assuming, Chris, the reason why we're not customizing the pilot or having a pilot skill tree is because then it's the same for every mech that person owns, right?
I wouldn't know the answer to that. I kind of came onto the skill trees fairly late in the process. I know that work was done on it pretty much before I even was with the company, so I wouldn't know exactly like what decisions led to, having it bound to the mechs as opposed to the pilots.
Well, I think in regards of that proposal, it's sort of like going back to, instead of you having a skill tree on the per mech basis, you just have one master one, which of course runs into issues, and that's a completely different.
Well, I mean, just shooting from my own hip and not necessarily the company line, because I just don't know. But I think that would not necessarily be better, for just gameplay, considering that most people would want to customize for the mechs and their individual loadouts, and not necessarily, the actual pilot itself.
Okay.
Because, the big thing to keep in mind is that the skills and everything have to essentially be balanced for the current progression system in the game. So it would probably be different.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could throw a few bits in there. I mean, it doesn't mean that someday we couldn't have some type of pilot tree, but I think people can quickly guess that it's not very interesting for the most part, or it's not very workable from a game perspective too. I mean, we're a free-to-play game, and it has to have some type of economy, and quite obviously, it's MechWarrior. It's going to be built around mechs, and it's going to be literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different variants. Is the only way that this game kind of exists and has a bit of an economy so that it can exist as a product, is because of all those hundreds of variants and making them the things that you buy and grind and level and play and master. And just, if it was just a pilot, then it would vanilla everything out.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be able to have the differences. So I think doesn't mean we still couldn't have some kind of small pilot tree someday with generic skills that apply to whatever mech you're in. But I think it's critical that you've seen it from the beginning, whether it's the 3 mech variant system to this. It's all about the characters of this game are the mechs, truly, not the pilot.
So I have a question in regards, Chris, and this has been brought up, and I know internally we talked about it. Node count, right? The amount of clicks, but also people, bring up the fact of small percentages. You don't really get a tangible, feedback. What's the difference between 0.8 or 1.5 or whatever? In regards to node count in that, can you talk about, is that necessarily a bad thing to reduce, or what does that do necessarily to what we were just talking about, which is rewards, trade-offs, or linear choices?
Well, I mean, like I said, we balance the trees based on the kind of high performance nodes and how long or how many SP it takes to pretty much get those nodes. And the node count currently right now, is specifically there so we can still offer players these alternative routes on kind of acquiring those nodes. Like, if you look at something like the weapons tree or the mobility tree, because there's a lot more nodes, it's a lot more easy to kind of get generally what you want. Whereas in something like the the operations tree, it's a lot more, well, I'm probably going to either take everything or nothing. So I'm not necessarily opposed to suggesting reducing the node count, but one of the knock-on effects of that is because again, we're not going to be providing linear trees because that compounds on balance issues. But what that ends up doing is it forces a much more linear path to acquire the entire tree. And so while there is a large number of nodes currently, it's there not just to essentially make sure that it takes a bit of time to acquire, but also so that on those larger trees like the mobility tree and the weapons tree, there are alternative paths to pretty much get to the nodes that you want, and you're not kind of forced into individual paths that you would probably have to be forced into for balance reasons if in smaller trees.
Well,
Here's another thing I would like to mention is when we first were creating the trees, we kind of, and I guess obviously, wanted the tree to represent everything in the game that had been represented in the past. Like if you look at all the weapon modules, all the other types of modules and infotech modules, and all the other things that were represented in the old skill tree, and essentially there's a handful of new ones, things that we like, the jump jet thrust vector. We tried to come up with some more useful ones, and I think there's room for some other ones in the game, whether it's other ideas similar to that. But once you just basically list out everything that had already been in the game represented, whether it was the old skill tree or whether it was the weapon modules or the tech modules and consumables and everything, you basically come up with this many nodes. And we felt it's important to try to represent everything that people had played or spent or got used to in the past to still be represented in the new system.
I had a point I was gonna make, and then now just totally blanked. Anyways, also too, I think it's, I think what's tough too is sometimes the pill to swallow. Right, is it's tough because as a player, how long have we had this system? I mean, since open beta.
Yeah, it's extremely hard to accept change.
Right.
I think maybe with these, I don't know. I mean, maybe this community, this game is no different than any other, but it definitely seems that change is hard.
And when you look at it from currently, we get all these bonuses in the mechs, 8 basics, 4 elites, and then the mastery. I do want to bring up something that concerned me as soon as I brought it up, and I know it's been brought up. Many of you guys, we're going from 13 clicks basically. Let's just say 13 plus the, are you sure you want to unlock that? Okay. To 91 potentially and more. A lot of people have brought that up. I mean, you do the math on that. Let's just say I have 300 mechs. You're going
Okay,
from,
but can I say something about
yeah,
that?
go ahead, go ahead.
I get it. I understand it. I totally understand the concern. But I mean, I think the only reason this is an issue is because we are talking about, a game that people have been playing for 5 years, and 5 years in, we've completely revamped the skill tree system because the initial skill tree system was really, we always viewed it almost as a placeholder. Really, it was the last feature that really hadn't gone unchanged since closed beta. So that's really why we wanted to tackle it, to kind of feel like we could, we fixed, I don't know, fixed, what the right word is, but essentially replaced all those kind of more placeholder systems. It was kind of the last one nagging at us. So when you change something 5 years in, this is kind of what you get. Because if you could imagine the game launches tomorrow, brand new, the game is brand new, it ships for the first time ever tomorrow in 2017. People come in, they log in, they play some matches in the trial mechs, they buy their first mech ever, and as they play their matches, every time they come out of the match, they, oh, good, I can unlock 2 more nodes. And they do another match, oh, they unlock 1 more node. Everything's fine, right? The only reason this is a concern is because we're a 5-year game, and people are going to have the ability after their refunds to master up to 150 plus mechs in some cases for some of these guys. Then yeah, I totally get it. That's a lot of clicks. But otherwise, you'd be looking to design some sort of like, because if they buy a brand new mech, again, it's not a concern either, right? It's really just like, I have all these mechs, I got this huge SIBO refund, so I got this one-time problem, really, of unclicking all these things. So I'm not sure that you did necessarily, I'm not sure what we could do from a UI design perspective for that, just that initial problem. Does that make sense? Am I missing it?
Well, I think it's just more the fact of a simplified way somehow of reducing the amount of physical time it's going to take, because even if you say on a per mech basis, right, like I buy a new mech and I'm going through the problem is you're still going from 13 to 91, and of course you have a lot of people saying click and drag, obviously. You have, but I'm just saying, if we can find a way to make it less time consuming,
of course,
right?
We just need the design. Phil, sorry to cut you off there. It's just like, I get it. We're totally open, not stuck on this. Like, no, this is the perfect way. It's a good UI. I think we spent significant time on it. We've made a lot of improvements, even just in the last 2 to 3 weeks as we've been going through PTS. But it's not perfect yet, and I think we just need to, I guess, approve a design that is technically feasible, and we can. I don't think we can squeeze it in time by patch, but I think we could put an improvement into the skill tree system just as soon as possible.
Well, speaking of the stuff that's already been improved, Phil, do you have that image?
I do have an image. I'm going to put up on screen. So this is in regards to firepower, as far as being able to distinguish nodes from one hemisphere to the other. We do have an updated image. I'm going to go ahead and drop this on screen really quick just so everyone can see it. We can also drop that link in the chat for everyone, and let me go ahead and get this up here for you guys before I say any further. Bam.
But I like the click and drag aspect. I mean, it sounds interesting. I would have to ask Peter and the guys to see how difficult or easy that would be to put in the system, but that sounds interesting.
Or
so you just kind of draw a shape, and then at the very end, you're buying all of them at once. I get it.
Because I mean,
or clicking on something that you want and then it autofills and then you can adjust or something like that.
Maybe have an unlock all button at the very top as well. Just stuff to ease, right? I think would go a long way. So this is basically the firepower weapons. You can see color coordination. We also have a different outline for owned, unlocked. You can see that the blue is for general, purple for being the ballistic centric, green for being missile, and of course yellow for being energy based and laser duration primarily. So this is what's coming down towards you guys. I think this, for me at least, looking at this, was you can immediately distinguish what sides, what nodes are what nodes for what. So you can easily distinguish, okay, I'm going to go the ballistic path, but I want to try to get as many of the general nodes as possible. So I like this. So
Yeah, and this is just part of ongoing upgrades and improvements and so forth that will there'll be stuff that comes out with the patch that you guys haven't seen, and there'll be, I'm sure, stuff post-patch to just make it all better and easier. Ongoing development, that is what MWO is.
Um, Yes, Chris.
Do you have anything to add, Chris? It's all your fault?
No,
Is that what it
I
is?
put you guys on Skype for something.
Gotcha. 1 second, let's check. All right.
Oh yeah. Paul did have another image that we could share as well, that kind of showed the more overall picture of the skill tree to see it at a distance.
I don't think I have that one. If you guys want to link me in, I can always provide it. So of course, for me, again, going back to just node count, like I got exactly what you guys got when you got on there. Was there too many nodes? What does that do if you reduce them? The amount of clicks. The first thing I did when I first logged on to the PTS was notice how many clicks, and then of course if you do the math, I don't think it would be as up in your face as you say, Russ. If you're just
Russ
buying,
has, stepped away for a moment.
well, I mean, just in general, if you buy a brand new mech and you're not unlocking all the nodes at once, I don't think that's big of a deal. But in the grand scheme of things, especially for the player base that's been around for a while, as soon as you get a handful of mechs, how many clicks that turns into is quite intense.
People are comparing it obviously to a lot of other games, and see, World of Warcraft has it right, blah blah blah. And Devil Cran just brought up a real good point, which is, which version of the World of Warcraft tree are you talking about? Because there's been like 5. Yeah, that's how it works sometimes. You continue to develop, you continue to polish.
The other thing to keep in mind about comparing it to RPG trees is that, for one, we're not an RPG, but also the various trees that I've always, gotten reference from whenever I hear the critique come up is usually focused on only a single class's tree, whereas in our trees we're really focusing on almost all aspects. So if you were to essentially compare it to those RPGs, it wouldn't just be about looking at the tree for a single class, but pretty much all the class trees combined into one and trying to make sure it works.
Okay, so I also want to point out, like, I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I feel like the biggest confrontation, the biggest points, have actually nothing to do with gameplay per se. Go on a limb, and for those that I participated on the PTS with, on second PTS, and then even the patch on Friday, after the DXL issue was fixed, I actually heard just positive things. I had multiple guys of you out in the chat that I know. We formed groups, we formed private lobbies, we were just going to town, whether or not, you went down one tree or another skill tree, regardless. But as far as the actual gameplay perspective, what it did and all that, for the most part, I heard nothing but good. So I feel like the most confrontational thing is the layout, if you will, the gating of certain nodes, and then of course the economy. I feel like that's another thing that
and Russ does want to address that. He wants to talk about the economy. While he's doing that, Phil, I did drop the image in Dropbox so that you can put that up. But Russ, what do you want to share with us in regards to the economy? I know it's an ongoing discussion and a lot of people tweeting you about it.
Yeah, it's been a busy day on that. We're doing our best to try and get it right. I think there's some aspects that we feel strongly about, and as you know, we only have an initial one-time CBIL cost per node now, which I think was well received. There's lots that would like to cut CBILs out of it entirely, but I don't see it as a possibility for a few reasons. One, I think it makes sense to have it there. It's like World of Tanks, or a lot of games have an XP portion and a soft currency portion, and you only have to pay it once. But also, if you're thinking about the the modules aspect, I mean, a lot of cases, people bought hundreds of millions of dollars worth of modules, and those are all being refunded 100%. And those module CBILs represented essentially skill tree points per se. That's really what they represented back then. So it's that those CBILs are going to be applied again into skill tree, into skill points, into skill point functionality. So I think it's important to have it. We have to have at least a one-time C-build cost, and that's exactly what people would spend those. Otherwise, we'd be giving them essentially the skill tree for free, plus hundreds of millions of dollars of C-bills worth of that they don't even have to go into the skill points or skill tree systems or into the same functionality they used to. Those C-bills were tied up into. So I guess we need to have a cost there. We're going to have a cost there. The last number that people had heard was 60,000 C-bills. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. I think there was some misconceptions there. And I think it's easy to have a misconception there because it's not like all the players can sit there and query the database and find out all the same stuff that we can find out. And it's really difficult for some of these guys, the whales and stuff, to go in there and count up their hundreds of modules and the cost and try to truly figure out, how it's going to work out for them. And they were concerned. Like the whale guy who put the video out today, and I'll try to keep this very general speak because even though he made himself public through the video, in a sense, his details and information is still private, but I'll use him as kind of a general example of someone who's concerned, who's been a very good customer and is worried like, I've spent all this time and money mastering these mechs and now I'm going to have to, do it all over again or spend tons of time and I'm just not going to do it. I understand that feeling too. But a few things to get out of the way. I mean, we have to keep in mind, of course, also that new skill tree does not equal old skill tree. There's a lot more in the new skill tree. So to say, first off, that old master exactly equals new master just isn't true. There's a lot more power and functionality in the newer tree. Even having said that, I think the misinformation is that this particular person, I'll use him as an example, had a lot of mechs, over 300, and had over, let's say around 120 of them mastered, and only a couple elite, actually less than half a dozen. So pretty much just 120 plus mastered mechs out of 300 and some. And we did decide a few days ago actually on a reduction in the cost based on some other research we were doing on the average C-bill earnings per match with new players, non-premium players, stuff like that. And we had actually lowered the cost from 60,000 down to 45,000. And so all of our latest math was done in the 45,000 C-bill range. And for the record, brand new players with non-premium stuff are averaging twice that. This is only about half their C-bill earnings. And then, of course, you're up into the 120, 150 for people with premium, and even upwards of averaging over 200,000 for your tier 1 players and stuff. So you'd be looking at up to 3-4 nodes per match, maybe even 5 nodes per match with certain players. But at any rate, back to the 45,000 number, we were calculating off of that. And this particular person, after they get their C-bill refund, which was huge, I can't even remember now, it's over 500 million, I think, in C-bill refund because of all the modules they had. After you apply 45,000 per node to all the 120 mastered mechs times 91 nodes times the 120 mechs, the total cost C-bills he'd spend would mean that he could master those 120 mechs again and have enough C-bills left over to master an additional 20 mechs. Much more than the 4 elite ones he had. That equals maybe 2 to 3 of the mastered mechs. So he's going to have a good 18 mechs worth of C-bills left. He could master 18 mechs he didn't even have mastered before, or spend those C-bills any way he wants, brand new chassis or whatever. So in that particular case, I think it was a situation where there was an assumed problem that grew into something that really there wasn't a problem there at all. That individual is going to be very happy on the day of the refund. Now, that's a good example I wanted to share with you. And there's a few others, like a friend of the show here and the company and the shoutcasters like Bandit. He has a heck of a lot of mechs. I've looked into his situation. I'd like to talk to him. You guys can let him know because you know him really well and you talk to him all the time. He's going to be he's an example of someone who has a lot of mechs and a lot of mastered mechs, a lot of elite mechs. It looks like he's going to pretty much be a wash for him. It's pretty much bang on. It's real close. So he'll be fine. I'm looking at other situations, and here's where the challenging thing comes. So there are some people, of course, that have a lot of mechs and a lot of mastered mechs, but they're cheapskates. I mean, no other way to put it. They don't have many modules. I'm teasing, but they don't have very many modules, and so there's not that many of those people, but they're kind of edge cases, and
I'm definitely one of them.
No.
No,
You-
I haven't bought a whole lot of modules at all. I
You're
always
one of those
module.
model swappers.
I
Yeah,
am a
so
module swapper. Yeah,
the problem here is that if I lower the amount to account for those people to like, it'd probably have to drop down to like 15,000 C bills per node or something like that. And, I'd think about it, and that would take care of pretty much those worst case situations. And there's not very many of them. Those the problem. There's a few of those kind of guys, like not that many, in that kind of spot. And then the other situation, obviously, it's a bonus for other people. They wouldn't mind this, but then you've got other people that would be getting like literally hundreds of millions of excess C bills. Now, as awesome as that sounds, I think you guys all want the game to continue to have a viable economy so that we can continue to, run this game. So we have to be responsible about that thinking too. We can't just be like, oh, sounds great, I'll take all the C bills. Otherwise, I'd consider it for sure. I have to be careful there. So I'll finish up here, Phil. So basically, I think it's going to come down from 45. We're continuing to do our research. I think already at 45, we've taken care of all those guys that were the big whale situations are really concerned. It's looking good for them. I've still got a few concerns that I'm looking into for those other, really module swapper guys. I think it's going to come down from 45. I don't know what yet. I don't know by how much. So I'm sorry you're going to be in the dark a little bit, but I hope that much information should make a lot of you already feel a lot better and a lot more comfortable about the costing. I guess you could consider 45,000 per node the cost at the moment, with a greater chance than not that it is going to come down again. I just don't know by how much.
So just to clarify, you're catching a lot of shit for using the word cheapskate, and I'm gonna be just honest here with everyone out there.
It's a tease.
I think you guys,
joke,
yeah, you guys,
Take it as
it's
a
a joke. Anyways, and then on top of that, I'm guilty of it as well. The module system is supposed to be end game, but unfortunately, in the long sort of process, the whole idea of like module swapping, the save times dramatically helped this as well. I'm guilty as shit of it. I mean, I think I own I should say this. I have put all modules on all my cicadas because that's how I roll. But for the most part, I just swap out one radar depth to the next mech and save because it's so quick. So that's what we're talking about. So if you're going to take it too seriously, come on, guys. But it's in regards to a mech fully moduled out was supposed to be around 18 million, right? That was supposed to be the intent of C bills being invested in a mech outside of just that. And well, that's not the case anymore. And I feel like that's where Russ, a lot of people, the kickback is right now they're having to invest in at least 5 million or some odd C bills per mech. And that initial number. I want to get
back to that initial point I made is like why there has to be at least some kind of C bill cost here, because essentially when people bought those modules, they were basically buying at the time like skill points in a way, like, and they have all those modules to apply to the skill points. So I was just teasing with the term like cheapskates or whatever, but it's just like I just mean that there are players, and I think people were rightfully saying, how are you going to take care of these guys, like these big spenders, these guys that have really supported us, and that's why I've been making sure that we're really looking into their case and taking a look at the data and making sure we're taking care of them. But same. Sorry, I think I let go of the button. The same thing applies to the people that have spent a lot of money though on modules, because they're essentially, it's like they bought a lot of skill points and they're getting refunded for all that. So it's not exactly fair of me either to lower the price per node to the point where I'm taking care of the guys who spent very little on, they're getting just as much of a reward as the people that spent a lot. So I think it is kind of finding a point where the vast majority of people are taken care of in a way that I described a minute ago. There might be some some outliers and the guys that were just extremely efficient. That's a better word for you. Very, very efficient at swapping out modules. It's going to be harder to make those guys, perfectly whole, because that's not the way that they play. They play with very, very efficiently in swapping out those modules.
And I just saw a comment in chat that basically said that was, why are you punishing people if that's how the system allows you to swap? Now with this new system, I'm going to be short, X amount millions of C-bills to be able to, master their mech or whatever. So, I
think the point to take from this is that it's still being looked at, it's still being discussed, and decisions are being made. And I'm getting a lot of private pokes from people laying out to their specific situation. I'm getting this many C-bills back, I'm going to be short this many or whatever. Russ is making a good point. We've got to balance it, and there's basically, I think Phil and I are a great yin and yang as far as like free to play games. Phil is, a quote unquote cheapskate. Every game we've ever played together in the 9 years that we've been playing, he will pinch every penny and not spend a dime. And I throw money at games, and we're very different as far as that goes. But the point I'm making is that, we're not just looking at any one section of the player base or trying to leave anybody out or fuck anybody over or anything like that. Everything is being discussed.
To be clear, when I jokingly used the term cheapskate, I wasn't even thinking about that as like real money.
Real money. You're talking about C-bills.
To me, modules are C-bills. It's about playing time and people kind of more pinching their pennies and watching their C-bills, not their real cash. Because we got plenty of guys out there that have loads of C-bills,
and they're just sitting on them.
It came from playing the game. It didn't come from spending money on the game.
Exactly. All right, so we hit economy, we hit the skill tree balance and all that. I mean, we can, I guess, field some questions if there's, things that people still want to bring up.
Can I toss this out here? Okay, obviously a very sensitive topic when it comes to economy, skill tree. People feel it should be this way, or, hey, why am I not getting back this? Obviously, Russ, you're receptive. You guys are making changes to the economy. We'll have to hear out and see more. But I just want to make clear, too, for those, Chris, this is your job. This is what you're doing. So you're going to be monitoring all of this. It's not like it's just going to go live on the March patch and then you're never going to touch it again.
Yeah, we're going to be keeping a close eye on it. We'll make changes where we need to. That goes for the skill tree, MechWorks, engine desync, pretty much everything that we're putting in.
Someone says, real problem here is the respec cost. Putting a C-bill tax, you only pay for a node once.
There's no C-bill cost in a respecking. All you do, when you say, I don't want this node anymore, and you take it off, you pay nothing. That was the change we made. And if you want to get it again, after you've already had it once, you pay 0 C-bills, and you only pay half the XP. It's like 400 or something. It's pretty low.
Merc, we'll hold you to that. Well, you do that. Because you just said it.
That's already official on the last PTS. I mean, honestly, we're only discussing one last thing from the economy point, from what I feel like, and that's just the initial C-bill cost per node. And obviously, there's opinions that should range from 0 to people that are fine with what we've got. So I've right now we're at 45. I think it can come down a little bit, but I don't think it can come down. I don't know yet. I guess I'll leave it at that for now. But we've got to try our very best to make that cost, that initial C-bill cost, essentially equal the modules. Because that's really what we're doing. We're saying, hey, you bought all these modules because essentially they were skill points. We want you to be able to trade those in for skill points. And the problem is it's not an exact science, because we have players that play the game very, very different from each other. Some that have literally 500 million C-bills worth of modules and mastered a ton of mechs. And then you've got guys that have still mastered a ton of mechs, but don't have very many modules. So that's where the challenge comes. That's the only difficulty really in coming up with that number, right? Is that situation.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of repeat questions, from earlier in the podcast. So be sure to check this out when it goes live. But if Chris and Phil, you guys want to keep
Well,
an eye on chat and see if there's anything.
Because I feel like this is something that was brought up too. Let's just say you have an idea, if you have an opinion on how something should be. I think Solomon did the exact thing you should do. He posted up, "Hey, this is what I feel. This is what I would do, or this is what I think." And he did it in a respectful manner, and we saw it. We've passed it on. They've seen it. We've talked about it internally and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where there is a way to go about with even criticism. And so if you don't necessarily agree, you may not agree with what Russ just said at all. That's fine. But do so. If you're going to make a post, do so, and we'll read it, but it has to be I'll tell you, me personally, if it's just like, fuck you, you don't know what you're doing, I'm just going to be like, all right, I'm just, there's,
Yeah, absolutely. There's a method and a channel to bring information forward, and I've been dealing with this for a long time with people regarding faction play and the competitive scene and various other things. People do get hurt, and I see comments like, "Oh, they obviously didn't look closely at Salama's thing because they're not implementing it or whatever." Understand what you're saying. I mean, guys, PGI is the game developer, right? So get your ideas out there. We absolutely do look at them. We, when people present things in the right way, that's not like, "Oh, this all sucks, fuck you," in Twitch chat. That's not going to get addressed. It will get looked at. It will be discussed.
And just because
things can happen.
Just because you posted something doesn't also mean it's going
right
to go in. It doesn't, like Duckfright just said, you read Salama's thing, but you're not addressing any of it. Chris just said why Salama's stuff doesn't align.
It, but you're not liking the
so
answer. But
you may not like the answer, but at least you can, so.
And we looked at it. We looked over it for hours. We sat in chat and discussed it with him for at least an hour and a half, something like that. We did. So just because, it's one of my sayings that so many of you probably dislike. You don't know what you don't know. And so I understand the passion. We all have the passion. And care about the franchise and the IP just as much as everybody else. And there's just a lot that goes into every decision, and it's being discussed inside and out every single day, every single week, every single month. And people's opinions.
You didn't read it properly. Oh man. Yeah. Like I said, it's a tough thing.
If you don't agree with me, then you're wrong.
It's like telling you guys in chat to come up with a general consensus of what, and it's never going to happen because everyone has different opinions. But
and just because somebody takes however many hours to propose something, because Poor Decisions TV, you're saying
I have ideas all the time. Doesn't mean
what parts are being rolled into the skill tree. Well, just because Salama took time to make it means that it should be rolled into the skill tree. I have ideas too that aren't in the game. Phil has ideas that aren't in the game. We don't always get what we want.
But you're wrong,
and that's just life. But there's no there's no the business plan at PGI isn't let's make something horrible for the game and tank it. Of course, right? We want to make the game as great as possible for everybody out there and to enjoy. And so again, it's these are human beings that care about their jobs, that care about the game, and I think people need to be a little bit more aware of that instead of just some of the comments.
And of course, this was a big topic to sort of undertake, but I think I hope anyone who's listening to this also understands that that's why we wanted Chris on here. And to have him talk, and whether or not you agree with their approach, their goals, how they're going about it, at least you know now where they are, where they're sitting, why they're doing something. And again, whether or not you agree, you can at least understand, and you can go from there. So we just wanted to get that out to you guys.
Well, right? Poor Decisions, I'll retort. Every single topic we've ever discussed since we've been doing this podcast for 5 years, half of the community argues one way and half the community argues the other way. So I know that you and your friends or anybody can say, I talked to 20 people and they all agree, but there's so many, this is such a passionate community. It's one of the things I love about it. One of the things that drives me crazy. It is, there's a ton of love. I've been playing this freaking game for 33 years, 34 now maybe. And I have that same drive and that same passion. So I understand it. I'm not mad at people for, having passion for the game, but you just got to take a deep breath and realize that there's human beings involved here and that there's things that you don't understand or don't know. That doesn't mean you're a moron or calling you an idiot. It means that there's things that you don't understand or don't know that's going on. And it's just, you know, it is what it is. But we do pay attention to the feedback. We love the feedback, and we, you know, talk to people within the community that are directly related to the things that we're talking about. So, you know, we do the best that we can. And the more involved that you guys are in a positive way, rather than, you know, saying stuff that gets you banned out of Twitch chat or whatever, the more those your feedback can be looked at and hopefully, if it works out, implemented. But anyway, you know, this is this is a passion for all of us, and like I said, it can be great and difficult sometimes. But anyway, I think that kind of wraps it up. Doesn't mean we're not going to have another one. We won't talk about this again potentially next week or whatever. But I want to say a big, huge thank you to Chris, and welcome to the bus, Chris. Try and stay on the inside.
Oh, the treads feel, you know, I guess that.
Yeah. Do you have marks on your skin? And Russ, thank you for taking the time as well. You weren't planning on being here, but we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. If I could just finalize with one thing,
Absolutely.
Just the one thing I want to drive home to make sure, because I know there's some people out there that are still saying, and just looking at the forums recently, someone had already posted that we'd come down to 45,000 C-bills, and it might come down a little lower. And the first response is like 0 C-bills, or, you know, GTFO, you know, take as much XP as you want, but hands off the C-bills. I can't refund like tens of billions of dollars of C-bills into the economy from the modules without putting a C-bill cost on the skill tree. It's impossible for the game to function and work. I have to drive that home. There has to be an initial C-bill cost. So it's about helping me find the exact number to kind of equate those modules. It's either that or we don't refund. I don't think NN's going to accept that either. We can't not refund all the modules C-bills, right? That would be an even worse outcry. So I've got to refund those module C-bills. It's got to come out of the initial one-time cost in the skill tree. So work with me on that. That has to be the case. I think you can understand why when you think about the overall economy of the game. If we want the economy just to work and just the game to function, it has to be that way. So we're at 45,000, may come down a bit more. I'm just trying to find the sweet spot. Okay? Thank you.
Cool.
Look forward to hearing. And of course, just want to say thank you to all of you guys out here. Hey, if you're new to the channel, this is what we do. We also stream mech porn every single day, so make sure to click that follow button above. If you're listening via SoundCloud or YouTube, just want to say thank you guys so much for your support and you guys hanging out here. And of course, if you are new, make sure to check out all the links down below, which of course, make sure to check us out, NoGutsNoGalaxy.net. Of course, Twitch at twitch.tv/NGNGTV.
YouTube at NoGutsNoGalaxy TV, Twitter at NoGutsNoGalaxy, Facebook at NoGutsNoGalaxy Podcast, SoundCloud at NoGutsNoGalaxy, and for all the latest and greatest mech porn t-shirts, be sure to check out NoGutsNoGalaxyStore.com.
Are you all right there?
You got me, Phil.
And of course, I just want to say a quick shout out to all of our new followers and subscribers. We just want to say you guys inundated me yesterday during my stream. Thank you guys so much. You guys are amazing, all of our new viewers, all that fun stuff, so thank you guys. And of course, I'll say thank you guys for being here. Have a great weekend,
and don't forget, we are sponsored by Nick's Jerky, nicksjerky.com. It's NIKS jerky.com. Be sure to check it out. Phil, I think I'm getting, what am I getting? I'm getting original and some more brown sugar. I'm
getting cracked pepper, garlic again, and chipotle lime because it's delicious.
It is yummy. Phil and I both love Nick's Jerky, so if you have any liking to beef jerky at all, check it out, Nick's Jerky, NIKS jerky.com.
All right, guys, that's going to be it for this podcast. Just want to say thank you again to Chris and Russ, Darren, Mama Bear. Oh yeah, by the way, nice hat.
Yeah, Russ, are you still here?
No, he's not. He's gone.
Is he gone? The reason why I wore this hat today, it is my pleasure to, I guess, fully announce MechCon 2017 is happening. No details, nothing I can share right now, but I'm super stoked about that because I had such a good time at MechCon 2016. Hopefully see a bunch of you at MechCon 2017.
Did you just drop that at the end of the podcast and then just drop the mic and walk away?
I totally forgot. Yeah, right. I totally forgot I was wearing the hat. But anyway, I'm super excited about that. But please, people, keep up the conversation that we've been having. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
This was your local No Guts, No Galaxy MechWarrior podcast signing off for tonight. This is Phil.
And this is Darren.
Until next time, Mech Warriors.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.